And we're back. This is Professor Scott Plum with the Minnesota Sales Institute and Bill Hellkamp with Reach Development Systems.
Have you ever found yourself in a new client meeting? Shortly into the discussion, it dawned on you there was nothing here for either you or the customer? How about those times when you had an appointment that was going well until you discovered that your price wasn't even close to an amount they were willing to spend? On today's show, we will explore the importance of qualifying prospects to avoid useless meetings and much more on episode 404 of the Get in the Door podcast. Well, welcome back. We want to start our podcast with the Magic of Thinking Big book club topic, Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. And the first chapter is called Believe You Can Succeed and You Will. And I really like this chapter, Scott. I don't know about you. What did you think?
It was a great kickoff to the book. It reminded me, and I come to think about it, my second chapter in my book is Believing Works When You Start Believing.
Yeah.
My book is taking off into the wind. And that was my second chapter after the first chapter, which was on commitment, which is a word that I want to be known for. So I think this is a great kickoff to this book, and it's a great chapter.
I like how David talks about it's not about wishing, but it's got to be about believing. And the key difference between wishing and, hoping for something to happen versus believing it can happen, which then will cause you to act in a different way. Right? We have to act differently, not just wish something. We can't just wish our way to wealth and prosperity. It's about believing, then that causes you to act in a new way.
Yeah, I think the line that I really liked is how to do always comes to those who believe they can. And simply put, is the belief trigger the power to do. Disbelief has a negative power.
Yeah, he says when you believe, the I can do it kicks in, and then the how to do it develops from that.
It's amazing how human nature is. I think if we live proactively, we can find the positive. If we live reactively, our natural mindset goes to the negative.
Mm-hmm.
And we really
especially these days, right?
Yeah, it's so simple. I mean, fear just seems to take over, and the fear seems to trump the freedom, which is sad to see, but there's some precautions that I think we all need to take, but it gets to a point of, how much fear do we live in? How much reaction do we have versus being proactive?
Right. Do you live in fear or faith, right?
Amen.
Yeah. Hey, interesting. On page 21, for those who are reading the book with us, he talks about being a thermostat, and I just love that analogy. And I've used this for years with a talk I do called Are You a Thermometer or a Thermostat? And a thermometer reacts to the ambient temperature, but a thermostat controls it. And that's what he's talking about in believing you can succeed and you will. You need to be the thermostat. You need to be the one who sets the temperature, sets the attitude, and sets the belief for those around you.
It's no one else is going to believe in me until I believe in myself. Mm-hmm. And I really need to be able to set my own thermostat.
You can bring your customers up to that level of belief if you're that thermostat, right? You can encourage them in the way that you talk, and they're listening to you and going, man, this person has hope right now. Why can't I move business forward? Now, you wanted to talk about, I saw in your notes you had the Mr. Triumph and Mr. Defeat.
Yeah, so did you. And I was really glad that we both kind of overlapped on that. And it's like the story about, we have two wolves that are constantly fighting in our head, and we have to decide which one we want to feed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same with, do we believe that we can, or do we believe that we can't? And no matter which one we believe, we're right.
Well, that's the old story about the guy who had two fighting dogs, and he always bet on the right one.
Yeah.
And somebody said, how do you know which dog's going to win all the time? He said, it's the one I feed the most.
Right, yeah.
And that's the one that's the strongest. So the question is, for all of us, is who are you feeding?
Right.
Are you letting those negative, as you said, we talk in our mind so much, are you letting those negative things be fed the most so that they control your actions? Or are you letting Mr. Triumph be fed the most so that those are the actions that you tend to follow.
And there's a process to follow that too. There's the maintaining the self-administered sales development program, which consists of 3 steps. And the first one is what to do. The second one is how to do it. And the third one is why to do it. Now, if you look at that process, why is always an emotional question. When you ask somebody, why do you do that? They're going to react and they're going to give you their emotional reasons, their motivation to do it. If we look at this process, we are motivated by why to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it starts off with what to do, how to do it, and why to do it, that's going to be able to be grounded in emotion, motivation to move emotionally. And that's what I always try to do when I do a training program or coaching program, is to have the 3D approach. It's what to do, how to do it, and why somebody would want to do it. That's the change motivation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so important to determine what it is we need to do on a daily or weekly basis, and not always judge our success by whether we accomplished, did I make the sale? We have to judge ourselves on what are the activities that I did that I know will eventually cause sales to happen. And so I really need to lay out my activities and then not worry about necessarily whether they come to fruition that week. But if I continue, if it's 10 or 15 or 20 phone calls a day, if it's 3 meetings a week or 30 meetings a week, whatever your plan is, do that plan. The how to do it will come to you, and then whether you have success in it will happen because you're doing the right things. If success doesn't come up after a period of time, maybe you need to change the things you're doing. Yeah. So I like your plan there. That self-administered sales development program is good.
Yeah, and only you can evaluate the progress too. You mentioned worry about it. And I think if you substitute the word worry to commit to it, I think you're going to get a different outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Worrying is having faith in the negative. Committing to it is saying, I'm in charge. Nobody knows what tomorrow is going to bring. In fact, with this whole pandemic, nobody knows what tomorrow is going to bring. So they can guess and they can prognosticate and they can do all that. Nobody really knows what's going to happen.
Right. And keep those conversations about other people controlling your life short, and start to talk about what can I control in this time.
So true.
Absolutely. I liked now you talked about a 3-step process, and Schwartz talks about a 3-step process on pages 25 and 26. He has the 3 steps to develop the power of belief. And he says those 3 steps are, number 1, think success, not failure. Just what we've been talking about, Mr. Triumph and Mr. Defeat. Remind yourself that you are better than you think. And that goes back to what you talked about, Scott. We beat ourselves up all the time. I'm no good. I'm not capable. I'm not worthy. You have to verbally go out. And I know a lot of people that create a little paragraph of positive success about I am good, I can do it, and get themselves jacked up with that. And then number 3, you've got to believe big. The title of my company is Reach Development Systems, and in the logo I have a star. And I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, reach for the stars. Mm-hmm. If you do, you may not hit them, but you won't wind up, in the mud. So if you reach too low, then even if you achieve it, you're not getting what you want. So reach for something bigger, think big, and create big beliefs.
Bill, if I can just mention one thing. For those of you that are playing along at home, Bill's page numbers might not overlap perfectly, depending on the edition of the book you have.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah.
All right.
Well, it is headlined How to Develop the Power of Belief. Yeah. What page do you have? A different page?
I do. Mine's on page 20.
Okay. I must have a lot more fluff in the beginning.
We have different Bibles, Bill, and different words in your Bibles. That's not what my verse says.
Well, the page numbers don't matter, but the thoughts do. And then he closes it out. And I think this is so important. And for anybody who has read anything by someone who's successful, have a plan for personal development. Listening to this podcast is great. Reading books is crucial. I've heard it said that you'll find yourself in the books that you read. And if you go back and read a book that you haven't read for a while, it's like the author went in and rewrote the whole book for your new needs. So have a plan for development, personal development.
Bill, if I can just add one more thing on that. I was talking with a good friend of mine, Mike McKinley, who's one of the former national presidents of the National Speakers Association. And he and I were chatting one day. He says, the best book anybody can read is one that they wrote. And to be able to write your own book and read it and be interested in it it's almost like a personal masterpiece. It's like when you first started speaking or training or doing anything and you start listening to your own words and your own classes, and it's like I couldn't tolerate it. I couldn't watch my own videos. It's just absolutely intolerable. And then the better I got, the more I got comfortable with it, and I was like, wow. And then I go and read my book and I go, wow, this is really good. I forgot about this. I mean, the older I get, the more I forget, so the more surprises I have when I read my own book. It's like, wow, this is really good stuff.
Good. Excellent book. So if you haven't picked it up, The Magic of Thinking Big by David J. Schwartz, get into it, start reading it, and we'll be doing chapter 2 next week. This segment of the Get in the Door podcast is brought to you by Steve Kloida's book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. Steve Kloida was known internationally for increasing salespeople's ability to make solid appointments with qualified prospects. You too can learn this essential skill by ordering a copy of his superb book, The Art of Prospecting, Your Guide to Getting in the Door. In this book, Steve shares the top strategies and tactics he has developed, implemented, and personally tested with more than 1 million sales and prospecting calls. You can get his book on the website, theprospectingexpert.com. In addition, check out his other great online resources. Instant Sales Coaching, which will guide you through 5 online success modules. A guided prospecting process entitled Call Reluctance Transformer, and the Magnetic Selling Strategies Workbook, a detailed step-by-step guide to increasing your sales. Get any of these valuable resources at theprospectingexpert.com.
So I'm really pleased with our Operation Reengagement. I'm looking at the downloads of the podcast, and we're getting our listeners reengaged, and it's showing signs of success. For you, our listener, share this episode with other salespeople. Forward it on to salespeople that are your customers and your clients, and invite your sales manager to listen and join in on the conversation. And here's what the conversation is about. Here's the goal of the podcast, and the reason that Bill and I are doing this is, how can we work together to increase top line revenue and shorten the sales cycle and increasing the closing ratio without cutting the price to win the business? That is the goal of our episode when the content is applied. And I'm really grateful to see new episodes being downloaded, and I'm really pleased to see past episodes being downloaded. So we're really engaging our listeners, and thanks for coming back. And thanks for listening to Bill and I. And I just encourage you to share the podcast with other people.
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of conversations from friends of mine, people that I know through some of the organizations that I'm in. They're really enjoying the podcast, getting re-engaged in it. And I know that you had some material sent to you by a mutual friend of ours on the value discussion that we had last week.
So the last topic was on value, and a good friend of ours, Ron Lehman, submitted a white paper. And if you're interested in that white paper, go to the website, getinthedoorpodcast.com, and you'll be able to download that white paper.
Excellent. I had a chance to look at it, and I think it really brings together in a written form many of the things that we talked about last week. Well, our new topic this week is qualifying prospects to avoid useless meetings. I think that too many salespeople, especially as they get good at making appointments, having those phone calls, they start to find themselves having more and more worthless meetings. You know, if you're getting too many meetings with the customers that aren't a good fit for your product or service, I think you really need to start qualifying during the phone call. I want to qualify this whole topic. If you're just starting out, take the meetings. You'll learn from doing a meeting. You'll learn what a good customer is and what they aren't. You'll learn how to ask questions. So this isn't for the new salesperson who's just trying to get as many meetings as they can. But if you're an experienced salesperson, you got to quit spending your time on meetings that aren't of value to you. So let me tell you a story, and what brought this up to me. I had a nice young lady call me the other day who's starting a business where she helps you get specially fitted for nice tailored suits. And as we were having the phone call, she did ask me, you know, where do you normally shop for your business suits? And I told her the Men's Warehouse, and okay, she said fine, and she moved on. Well, it turns out that these suits are expensive and very nicely done, and probably not at the level where I normally would buy these suits. So she should have asked a couple of other questions that would have qualified me better, such as how much do you spend annually on your business wardrobe? And or have you ever considered a tailored suit instead of buying something off the rack? And I think we really need to try to understand if we share the same values as the person we're talking to on the phone. What are your thoughts on that, Scott?
I think that is just so true. I think salespeople need to qualify the appointment, because the last thing a salesperson wants to do is waste their own time. So that's being a bit selfish, but they also don't want to waste a prospect or a potential client's time either. If you're getting in and having appointments with people that just want to get information out of you as a salesperson and not buy from you, then you're not really qualifying them. You're giving unpaid consulting. It can be very expensive for a salesperson to continuously do that. The goal is to really be a problem finder and not necessarily a problem solver to begin with.
Right.
Because your solutions have to stick to a problem. We talked about it in the last episode of the podcast. But qualifying what is a perfect fit, I think, is so important when you're targeting an outbound phone call to a prospect.
Yeah. Let me give you an example from my life, and maybe you share these same things. But when I'm on that call, I'm trying to find out if I've got somebody who shares my values, right? Because if we don't have similar values, we're probably not going to do business together. So some of the values I look for, and I'm a trainer, right? So I work with companies. I want companies who perceive that their employees are the key to their success. And if they don't think their employees are the key, they're not going to spend money to make them get better, right?
Yeah.
So if they don't value their employees, they won't spend money to train them. And what I think is it's easier for me to find someone who believes that their employees are worth training than it is to change a company's entire culture to value the employee. I'm not going to change their culture.
The strategy that I use is I talk with a business owner or somebody that's in charge of running a company, and I ask them, do you believe there are more opportunities in the marketplace that you're not taking advantage of? Usually the answer is yes. And then the next question is, do you believe that you've got the right people to be able to go out and get those opportunities? And usually the answer is yes. And then I ask them, are you willing to invest in the people that you have to take advantage of the opportunities in the marketplace?
Mm-hmm.
There's some hesitation there sometimes. And then I say, that would be the goal of our phone call, is to talk about training and developing your salespeople, your current team, your frontline army, to be able to convert conversations into.
Right.
That would be the goal of our meeting.
Right.
Would you be willing to invite me in, and we can spend 30 minutes, maybe an hour together talking about what that would look like?
Yep. I think that's so good. And there's nothing wrong with asking some questions that will pique their interest. You're not trying to get rid of people with this qualification. So Scott, you taught me a question that is really important in helping qualify a customer, but also pique their interest a little bit, make them think in a new way. The question that you taught me to ask a sales manager is, are you going to increase the quota of your sales team this year? Oh, absolutely, will always be the answer.
Yeah.
And then the second question is, so what are you doing different to help them achieve that? And they haven't even thought about that. Oh, no, they just are supposed to do better. Right. So it helps pique their interest in doing something different. And perhaps I can cause them to think that training might be the answer to that. But we still are qualifying them. If they say, no, I'm not going to train my people, well, it's not really worth our time.
Yeah, I usually ask them, what are you going to do different tomorrow that you're not doing today that's going to give you the results that you want that you don't currently have? And, cue the crickets. We don't know. And that's where the conversation begins. And one thing I like to add is, when you have a meeting with somebody, you always have to have an agenda. It's really going to make it a lot more beneficial to reach the outcome if you share your agenda with the prospect and you find out what the prospect's agenda is. What do they want to cover? And here's the question that you ask is, suppose the 30 minutes were to go by, the 1 hour, whatever we've got scheduled together. What are some of the things that you want to make sure that we cover within that time?
Mm-hmm.
And then you begin with the agenda. You say, I've got some things, you've got some items, let's, and why don't you go first? And then I always ask my prospect to go first. And then I would concentrate on their agenda, because one of the things of my agenda is to find out the pain and to understand the process of how they make decisions. That's my goal.
Yep.
because then I can present a solution and follow a process in order to make an impact on the sales team to give them the outcome that they want.
And there's nothing wrong with finding out those agenda items once you've secured the appointment. They say, hey, look, I'll sit down with you for that half hour, 45 minutes. And then you can ask that question. So what would you like to make sure we talk about when we're together? And then when you come in with the agenda, with the questions, with whatever, you're prepared in advance for what they want to talk about, in addition to the direction that you want to go. And they feel more in control then of the appointment versus feeling like you're going to interrogate them.
Yeah, so true. I think a great homework assignment for any prospect that you meet with is, between now and the time we meet, could you create 3 things that you want to make sure that we cover? And it's some of the challenges that you're experiencing, some of the things that you wish were different in the behavior of the sales team, and some of the outcomes that you believe that you deserve as a sales leader from the sales team. And now we're really starting to be able to get them to visualize the implementation of the techniques that are giving the results that they want.
Yep. And we're increasing the value of that time that we're going to spend together. So we're moving ourselves as professionals in the sales field from somebody who's going to go in and show them the catalog, an order taker, to someone who's going to have a good quality conversation with them, because we've set that quality conversation up. So often I see a person in a prospecting vein, right, having that phone call, and they secure the appointment, and there's this like, get off the phone as fast as you can, you got the appointment. Instead of saying, let's make this appointment, this time we're going to meet, as valuable as we possibly can. They're so afraid they'll lose the appointment that they don't spend time making it a quality appointment.
One thing that I'd like to add as we start to close up on the topic is a blog that I wrote many years ago on, you don't need to educate your prospects. I think that there's a mindset of some salespeople going into a meeting saying, I'm here to help, I need to educate you, and I need to be able to prove to you how much I know. That is the wrong agenda. The agenda is uncovering the need, understanding the impact if they don't do anything, and really getting an idea of the results that they want, and really sell to the gap. All you have to do is sell to the gap between where they are and where they want to be. And I'll include a link to that blog on the show notes at getinthedoorpodcast.com.
Yeah, and you talked about homework for the customer. I'm going to give our audience here a quick homework assignment. They can either do it now or right now and stop the recording, or they can do it later. But here's what our assignment is. I want you to write down 4 to 6 characteristics of a person that fits your customer profile. So stop the podcast right now if you want to, and do it. Now, if you stopped, you should have been able to do that exercise in a minute or so. If you can't do an exercise like that, you don't know who your customer is. You don't know who you're calling, and you're wasting your time because you're calling on the wrong people. What are some of those values, or what are some of those characteristics, I call them? Industry, size, could be revenue or employees. What do they value? What's the company value? What's their job title? Location? Do they have a budget? Too many people don't find out if there's any budget. So you need to really think about, who is my customer? Who is my best customer? What is the profile? And then perhaps you need to work with marketing and find out who they're targeting for you. That can be a good tip as well. But our goal is not just to have more appointments, but to have appointments that have true value, because you're talking to somebody who is capable of making the decision and wants to move themselves forward in the proper way with your product or service.
Let me add one thing. And the reason that we do that is because we want to have the best closing ratio possible, the shortest sales cycle possible, the highest gross margin possible, and not cutting the price to win the business. So those are 4 things that we want to be able to get out of a perfect fit, and to look at that criteria. The example that I use with salespeople is, when you go out deer hunting, how many pheasants do you bring home? And the answer is none. Well, that's because we're not hunting pheasants. We're hunting deer. So when you go out deer hunting, you're hunting deer, but you're not bringing home any pheasants. And that's the difference between a perfect fit and a misfit.
Prepare for a good meeting with the right kind of client, the right kind of prospect.
So our gold nugget for the episode is by John Wooden, who's a very famous basketball coach. And he once said, "You are not a failure until you blame someone else." And I just love this quote.
Wow.
Because as you read the next chapter of the book, I think you'll be able to find out the application of that quote and what that really means.
I think that means that everybody in politics right now is a failure because all they're doing is blaming other people for everything that's happened.
You know, you can look at a politician and go, what is the goal? What is the goal? The goal is to get reelected. That's
Right.
the goal. It's not to serve the constituents. Now, there's some that are different. All right, I'll take emails and letters. There are some that are different, but the politician's goal is to get reelected. Period.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But yes, I agree with that quote 100%. Once you start pointing your finger outside yourself, you quit taking responsibility and you start to just be a whiner. Yeah, there's things that happen to us. Yeah, we're in a lockdown. Yeah, we're in some challenging times. But there's people out there closing sales in your business, and you're missing it because you're sitting there spending your time blaming others. It is what it is, baby. And so go out and do what you can. Don't be blaming.
Yeah. And next episode, I will share a personal story as to how I learned about the application of John Wooden's quote. So stay tuned for that.
That is great. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm always looking forward to our next podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the podcast today. Don't forget our website, getinthedoorpodcast.com. For me, my website is reachdev.com for reach development, reachdev.com. Scott, I know you have some information for the show notes.
It'll all be there at getinthedoorpodcast.com. We'll have all the links available there.
All right. Next week, chapter 2 of The Magic of Thinking Big. Cure yourself of excusitis, right? Blaming. The failure disease, excusitis. So that really ties into what Scott's quote was from John Wooden.
And then our next focus topic will be on the false facts of making your number.
I know you hate that.
I know.
Thanks all for being here. It's been a pleasure being with you this week. Listen for the next Get in the Door podcast.